To develop this competence, it is very essential for a good, successful life, a life of reality. We all have to live a life of reality. What is the situational variable in my classroom? How can I respond to this? I was not trained in my B.Ed training to respond to this. Here, my maturation, my experience, my emotional learning, that will help. Emotional intelligence will help. It leads us to emotional management, and whether we say emotional intelligence or emotional quotient, it helps us to recognize and understand one's emotions, that of the others, but also it helps us to analyze different feelings that we have and to label them. And for example, if you're feeling sad, sad is different from grief. Anger is different from irritation. So we have to understand our different feelings and label them so that we can identify those in the children that we teach, and we can do the work appropriately and use emotional information to guide thinking. Now, emotional intelligence, emotional quotient is a measure of person's adequacy. And we need to have this adequacy in today's day and age to be successful in a challenged classroom. A classroom today has many challenges. So we need to have this emotional intelligence, the adequacy. It is definitely expected that the teacher will have knowledge. Otherwise, why are we teachers? So we want to communicate that knowledge to students. That is why we are teachers. We want to shape the future generation. We want to mold the future generation. Now that is no longer that easy in 21st century. So one ability which is going to help us to be adequate for the mission and the vision that we have in our lives would be emotional intelligence. And to deal with emotional intelligence, we will need to acquire it definitely, and it will help us in self-awareness, empathy, dealing sensitively with other people, children in our classroom, also in our personal lives, in our social lives. It will help us to deal with relationships. Now, emotional intelligence is, of course, the ability to manage one's emotions. Some researchers feel it is a product of heredity and environment, but most researchers feel it is learned and it is acquired, and it develops because of influence of your own environment in which you have grown up or which you are in at present. So it will help us, emotional intelligence will help us to develop an ability to identify, understand, realize and manage one's own emotions, our own emotions, as well as identify, understand, realize emotions of others. But for the others, we won't be able to manage or control others' emotions. We can only manage and control our own emotions, but we won't be able to manage others' emotions. But at least emotional intelligence will help us to understand the emotions of others. So emotional intelligence helps in developing various facets of one's personality. It helps one to understand social skills, the relationships that you enter in your classrooms, in your school, in your college, in your university, as teachers. The relationship that you will enter, I'm talking to you as teachers, the relationship that you will enter in your social life, in your personal life. So social skills is something which emotional intelligence will help us, you and me, to achieve. Now, once we understand our own emotions, once we understand the emotions of others, then we will be able to regulate ourselves. As I mentioned, we will not be able to control the behavior of others. We will not be able to control the behavior of the people that we are teaching. But I can regulate my own behavior. But if I can influence the children to regulate their behavior, then they can acquire it. If I'm able to influence, which we should try to do in terms of what is good habits, what is bad habits, how to lead life, what we do as teachers. So self-regulation is something which you and I will be able to do. Further, emotional intelligence helps us for our intrinsic motivation. So it will motivate you to lead life, to do your work effectively, to manage your emotions, control your emotions, to adjust. So it will help us to develop our intrinsic motivation. It will also help us. An emotional intelligent person also is very capable of providing a source of extrinsic motivation to our students. So we are able to motivate our students. Something very essential with emotional intelligence helps us to do is create in us empathy, so that I understand what the students are going through, what another person is going through, and I try to close my eyes and be in the shoes of that person. And I try to think, if I was in the shoes of that person, what would I have done? How would I have felt? At that moment, what do I want my teacher to be? And accordingly, we can act. Accordingly, we can function. Accordingly, we can make a decision. So it helps us to develop empathy and develop sensitivity towards children, towards students, to people around us. Finally, emotional intelligence helps us to be self-aware. You are aware of your strengths, you are aware of your weaknesses, and you are completely in identification of exactly what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. You are able to identify, you are able to manage. Maybe not always, after all we are human, but as much as we can, we try and control our own emotions. We self-regulate, we are self-aware, we have intrinsic motivation, we try and develop good social skills, healthy social skills, and empathize towards our environment. So this emotional intelligence as a concept, as an ability, helps us to handle relationships judiciously and with empathy. So when I face this child in the classroom or in the school, in any place in the school, then I know that I have to develop